You have such a breadth of knowledge in this world of strength conditioning. It's hard to tap into a lot of it. I laugh because I'm pretty nerdy in this stuff, and you're a whole nother level. You're a whole nother regimen. I remember we're at Crash Crucible last year, and Ellie, we're going down the road, and I'm driving Ellie to the gym, and Ellie's one of your athletes, and I'm driving, and all of a sudden I look over, and Ellie's got this balloon hanging out of her mouth, and she's got her phone, and she's breathing to the rhythm that's on her phone for this. I said, "What are you doing?" And she said, "I'm just doing what Kyle told me to do." I'm like, well, "What is this?" And I started looking into that a little bit. But you got all sorts of stuff like this, and you look at that stuff at surface level, and you're like, really, what's behind this? And then you start getting into some of the literature behind it, and there's some decent amount of evidence. And obviously there's different tiers to a lot of this of what's coming in. You have your highest level of tiers like you do with VFR, and then you have some of the lower level tiers. But the cool thing about you is when you're talking about the highest end of the athlete, you're talking about the high end chain, the most complex that a human body can be. Some of these things that for Gen Pop, you're not going to see any type of change. For the high end athlete, you will see maybe a 1% to 2% increase. And for that level, that's amazing. That's a huge deal. So let's mesh some of that. So you're prepping for the CrossFit Games right now. You're getting ready to go as a Masters athlete. Walk us through what you're doing for yourself from a program perspective. What does it look like going up to the games? And then what are some of those things like we just talked about with VFR or the balloon type thing? What are some of those things that you're utilizing to prep for all of this, and why are you doing it?
Well, the first thing that you do whenever you're preparing for a task is you perform a needs analysis, right? We talk about this in our courses extensively, that the first thing you need to do is you need to know what you're doing. And even though CrossFit is supposed to be unknown and unknowable, like we talked about previously, there are certain domains that we know that you're going to prepare for. So basically, we look at that, and then we've got a pretty good sense of what that's going to look like. We've all been, everyone that's at TTT has been coaching CrossFit for a long time. So we have a good sense of what that needs analysis looks like. Yeah. And then we kind of run that through a filter against the athlete's, profile, the best way I can describe it. So like an athlete profile for me, I definitely adapt to strength and power work very, very rapidly. I'm better at shorter time domain workouts. I struggle with longer time domain workouts, vertical pressing. We talked about this, some of our struggles with handstand push-ups and vertical pressing when we were at the semifinals. So like that's a big factor. So we kind of take the known and knowable elements that we have in the sport and what we know about the athlete, or myself in this case, and like mesh them together. And that is the core of the program, right? So those are what I would consider to be my priorities, training longer time domain things, higher volumes of vertical pressing to make sure that I'm prepared for that if it shows up. And then we look at some of the novel stuff that doesn't really get trained throughout the season that only shows up at the CrossFit Games. So things like the handstand ramp, pegboards, legless rope climbs, covering distance with sandbags, handstand walks and things like that, and start to bring some of those elements in. So the training is the core of the program, right? Like I'm not going to sit here and tell you like, oh yeah, what I do is I spend most of my time breathing through, breathe way better doing isopapnic training. Then I do 2 hours of sauna, cold, that's not the core of the training. Those are just like the little 1% things that I know no one else is doing because almost nobody else knows about them.
Yeah.
And it's like, I'm trying to stack little 1% things. Cause if you stack the 1% you've seen, I'm sure, eventually you're getting almost exponential returns on it. Not exactly the way it works, but yeah. So the core of it is just training. And to me, one of the things I've learned is that training with other people, at least at this point in my career, I'm 39. I've been competing in sport at a fairly high level for a really long time.
Yeah.
20 plus years at this point. For me, it's about doing it with other people. It's about getting in there and racing and getting pushed. And so one of the big aspects of my training is leveraging Travis and Alexis, who are, two of the best athletes in the entire world, that I have, a 25-minute drive and I can go train with them. And so that's really a big part of what I'm doing this summer is I'm spending as much time training with them as I can. When I'm not training with them, I'm training with my wife who's preparing for the High Rocks, doing some of the longer time domain stuff that she's really good at, that I'm pretty weak at. So she's pushing me there. And then the rest of my sessions are dedicated to those priorities, developing the things that I struggle with relative to what we know about the sport. And so that's the core of my training. And that encompasses, two training sessions most days a week. Right now it schedules two training sessions on Monday, 2 on Tuesday, 1 very skill-oriented training session on Wednesday. We just got done with a swim session. Even though I was a swimmer, I still need to do it to make sure that I can, perform at a high level. And actually, Travis beat me in the first workout. We did. I'll lay out the session that we just did. I wrote it. I write our swim training sessions. We went through a whole warm-up series, and then the first workout was 10, 8, 6, 4, 2, dumbbell shouldered overhead, but that's each arm. So you do 10 on the right, 10 on the left with a 70-pound dumbbell for Travis and I, and then a 50 for Alexis. Then 50 swim after each one of those. So it was 250 yards of swimming total and 60 total shouldered overhead with a pretty heavy dumbbell. It was heavy for me and Alexis. It was not heavy for Travis. Travis annihilated us on that one. We rested 15, 20 minutes, and then it was 3 rounds for time, 30 calories on the Concept 2 bike, 100-yard swim. And I snaked Travis on the middle of the second round on that one. And then we had like a longer continuous swim just to make sure, should open water swimming show up for any of us, which I hope that it doesn't. I hope it's pool swimming. Should it show up that we're all, conditioned and ready to go. But that was a good example. And we raced. Each one of those, we were done and we were smoked after that session. But that gives you a good idea of what a racing session or what a training session with some of those guys looks like. And that was a pool session. They're even harder when we're in the gym. So I do, the single on Thursday and then double on Friday, double on Saturday, and rest on Sunday. So that's, my current week layout. And that affords me as many opportunities to train with them as I can. In those opportunities when I'm not able to train with Travis and Alexis, and training with Haley, my wife, as much as possible, and then just taking care of the skill stuff outside of that. So in terms of a training perspective, that's what it looks like. There's a bit of periodization. Like right now is easier. We're definitely in kind of a foundation phase because the Masters games is 4 weeks after, or 3.5 weeks after the individual games. So I have a much longer window than them. So I'm definitely in the bottom end of the ramp up.
I love that they're doing that, by the way. I think that's such a good decision. I really do.
That was a fantastic decision by CrossFit. Yeah. I think separating them is going to be, it really lets them focus on the Masters when it's time for the age groups and just in general, adaptive athletes, when the adaptive athletes go, lets them focus on that.
Yep.
Rather than we're going to, create the best spectacle for the individuals. And then everybody else is just, hey, thanks for coming. Here's your gift bag.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's the main training. There's periodization to it. Obviously we're ramping up. That's going to get harder. We're going to race more. We're going to, go through some simulations. That's, I think, a really important thing. If you look at MMA fighters, they always have their training camp, which is almost like a simulation for fight day. We adopted that philosophy back in 2017, 2018, that, a few weeks out, we run our training camp, which is really just kind of like a simulation of the games weekend. We might do 3 events one day, 2 events the next day, 4 events the next day, 3 events the next day, and go through a 4-day, full on simulation. You're wrecked afterward, you go through a brief deload, but just being able to touch that kind of intensity that you get when you are racing and having to recover and come back and hit the next one, that's a big component of preparing high-level athletes for something like a semifinal or a games, type competition.
Guys, I hope you're enjoying the video. If you are, please like this video, subscribe to our channel, and ring that notification bell so you never miss out on any opportunities to enhance what moves you.